A merry wedding. "Out!" shouted Jeremiah Kennedy, "and don't come back." A door banged violently, and while the small house shuddered, Jeremiah stamped into the kitchen, every hair and whisker abristle with rage. His wife looked up with amusement from the dough she was kneading. She was used to her man's temper and did not fear it. "It's that young devil from the store again," he growled, throwing himself onto a flimsy kitchen chair. "Hanging round waiting for the girls, and hasn't the decency to get out of his working clothes. And when he's not hanging round, he's lounging in the bars." He banged his fist fiercely on the deal table beside him. "I'll not have it. Any young fellow who wants to see my girls has got to come decently, dressed and sober. Or he'll go out a lot quicker than he came in. Like that young bounder. He won't be back anyway." "Good riddance too," agreed Mrs. Kennedy. "I don't like him, nor do the girls, or the boys. But you must admit most of the lads who come are nice boys." "They'd better be," snorted Jeremiah. Mrs. Kennedy sighed. "It isn't easy bringing up girls in a place like this. Sometimes I get worried. What sort of future is there for them?" But Rachel, Agnes, and Rebecca were not in the least worried about their future. The present was too absorbing. Carefree Agnes was perplexed one evening when father, now her constant companion, asked her to go riding with him, then fell into tongue-tied dejection. "What on earth's the matter, Harry?" she demanded. "You're as cheerful as an undertaker. Let's gallop and shake your wits up a bit." He leaned over and grasped her rein. "No, Agnes, I don't want to gallop. I want to talk. You see, I'm going away soon, to England." She stared at him, eyes wide. "Are you going away for good?" "No, just for a holiday. But I'll be away some months, of course." "But a trip to England costs a fortune." He smiled. "As a matter of fact, I've got quite a lot of money to spare now. I've done well with shares lately, and there's plenty of profit in stockbroking. Besides, I'm secretary to several of the mines, and they pay well. In fact, the 21-year-old youth shifted his gaze from the girl beside him and fixed it with proprietary pride on the panorama of small mine dumps and shacks ahead. "I'm rather a rich man now." "I'm glad," said Agnes warmly. "You work so hard. What will you do in England?" "See my sisters first, of course. They're both married now. They did so much for me in the old days, helping me to come out here and all that. I'm going to try and persuade them to come to South Africa too. There are such fine opportunities all over the country." "What fun! Perhaps they'll come here. Then you could all be happy together," cried Agnes. Father nodded. He was blushing all of a sudden, but he kept his eyes steadily on hers. "There, just one other thing. I'm going to ask your father if I can take you to England with me." Jeremiah Kennedy and his young visitor faced each other amicably, but firmly across the dining room table behind discreetly closed doors. Jeremiah carefully lighted his pipe and spoke between gigantic puffs. "No, Harry, I like you, boy. I'm impressed by your interests and your prospects. You've done downright well for a young chap your age. But I'm not going to let you marry Agnes and take her to England." He gazed at the young man with chin raised stubbornly. His would-be son-in-law leaned forward, equally stubborn. "But, Mr. Kennedy, what is your objection?" "Simply that the girl's too young. She's only 17. That's too young either to marry or to go gallivanting off to England without someone much older to look after her." "Then what do you consider a suitable age?" 18 at least." The lad smiled and relaxed. "Then it's just a question of time before you give your consent?" Jeremiah grinned back at him. "I suppose so. Look, suppose we compromise. Leave things as they are till Agnes is 18. And so it was. Half Johannesburg took an afternoon's holiday for the wedding. Everybody knew the prospective bride and bridegroom, and every detail of the arrangements was discussed with keen anticipation. The wedding was to take place in the little chapel which now stood only a few hundred yards from the Kennedys' place. 2 priests would officiate, Father Mongino and Father Trabo of the OMI from Pretoria. Mr. William Casey, Miss Rebecca's young man, was providing a new brougham and 4 white horses with white ribbons galore on horses and whip. Mr. Casey himself would act as coachman, and Mr. Connie Fitzpatrick would be footman. "And I shouldn't be surprised if he's a bridegroom himself before long," whispered the gossips. "The way he's been dancing attendance on Mary Ann, young as she is." The great day came. The new brougham with its 4 white horses stood at the church door, and scores of diggers crowded round, ears strained to catch an echo from within. At last the joyful sound they had been awaiting rolled towards them, the wedding march ringing from the old family harmonium with all the volume Rachel could muster. And there they were at the door, bless 'em, Mr. and Mrs. Harry Fulmer. For a moment there was silence as the young bridegroom and 18-year-old bride stood smiling a little uncertainly at the crowd. Then a burly digger yelled, "Come on, folks, give them a cheer," and pandemonium broke out. Rice by the bucketful was poured over the young pair, and bunches of flowers flung at them. Quickly they climbed into the carriage. The horses were catching the excitement, becoming almost uncontrollable. As the 2 sat down, Casey, the coachman, fell off the box. Amid a roar of sympathetic laughter, Connie Fitzpatrick, who was struggling to hold the 2 leading horses, let go and leaped into the driver's seat just as the team tore away. Tangled reins seemed to be everywhere. Fitzpatrick gathered them up as best he could, but the horses were beyond control and made straight for their own stable, where they stopped at last. Thankfully, Fitzpatrick mopped his brow as a surprised voice from behind demanded, "Where on earth are we, Connie?" "At the stables," gasped the perspiring footman driver. "And lucky you are to be here. I thought we were going to Kingdom Come. I thought we were going to the reception," chuckled the bridegroom. "Didn't realize they were out of control." "Oh my goodness," cried Agnes. "Whatever will everybody think? Do hurry up and get us home, Connie." Fitzpatrick jumped down and opened the door. "Sorry, nothing doing. I'll never get the horses to face the crowd again, even if I could coax them out of the yard, which I doubt. Sorry, you two. I'm afraid you'll have to walk." Bride and bridegroom stared at each other in dismay. Then Agnes threw back her head and laughed. "What a lark! Come on, Harry, let's go." So the bride, bridegroom, and footman trudged bravely back across the veldt and presently marched through lines of cheering, clapping spectators to take their place on the home porch and receive their guests.